We have been saying the same thing, basically, that the principal challenge facing our economy and our people is that of unemployment, youth unemployment in South Africa. We're not shocked by the statistics that came out from the ILO presented in the recent World Economic Forum, that South Africa is on position number 8 when it comes to worst unemployment rates in the world. That is our biggest concern. Next to that challenge is the crisis of poverty and inequalities. As you know, poverty has come down since 1994, but albeit very slowly. Far too many people are still living in poverty in South Africa. Statisticians estimate that up to 26 million out of the 54 million South Africans are living below $1 a day. And we've seen reports, including that of government, Oxfam report, for example, indicate that 13 million South Africans are unable to put food on the table every night. And about 14 million are facing hunger and poverty. And inequalities have grown tremendously over the past 20 years. South Africa has always had a crisis of inequalities during the apartheid. That was acceptable, perhaps, and that was to be expected. But after 20 years of democracy, to be told that we have now moved to position number 1 or 2nd in the whole world when it comes to inequalities is a disaster.
You mentioned a very interesting part, inequality. How do we deal with the question of inequality? Going 20 years back, has government strategies of job creation succeeded or produced good results, positive results?
Unfortunately, they haven't. The results that we show year in and year out is that we are in worse situation than we were even during the apartheid era. We're now sitting at 25%. That's using the official rate or the narrow definition of unemployment, which means that you're not counting workers who have long given up searching actively for employment opportunities. But when you count those workers, our unemployment suddenly climbed to nearly 36%. That's a disaster in everybody's disaster. It's a catastrophe. And as we usually say, in particular when you consider youth unemployment, it's a ticking bomb. We're sitting with half of our young people unemployed, and we're rating number 4 in the world when it comes to youth unemployment. And that's not sustainable politically. I think that there is a direct relationship between what we're seeing in our television images daily in Soweto, now moving to West Rand, Sebokeng, and elsewhere, where young people loitering in the streets, doing absolutely nothing, frustrated.
And they resort to all forms of activities.
Resorting to all manner of activities. The drug problem, the nyaupe is the biggest spoken about drug in the country, and suddenly we have people looting foreign national shops.
That issue speaks to everyone having to stand up, including the youth themselves. Is the situation on the ground enabling the youth on the ground to free themselves out of the vortex of poverty?
In my view, or in the view of Cosatu, the Federation, the crisis of unemployment in the country is structural. And frankly, we have not moved fundamentally and decisively to address the structural nature of the South African crisis of unemployment, poverty, and inequalities. We have not dealt fundamentally with the questions or the challenge of restructuring the economy of South Africa, which remains largely dependent on the mining, on finance, and on heavy chemicals. And that's not the area where you should be generating jobs. We have insisted that we ought to address and change the growth path we inherited from apartheid, because that growth path continues to reproduce unemployment, poverty, and inequalities. And we need to be put into a new growth path which is underpinned by industrialization, meaning that we need to break down the monopolies in the economy that controls everything. We need to ensure that we address the issues of asset poverty on the part of the majority. The fact that the mining industry, the economy in general, remains completely controlled by a white minority, to the extent that, as we now see from the statistics, even from the government, that tells us that when you look at the ownership patterns, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange is about 93-95% owned by the white minority or males, and only about 3 to 5% is owned by black. You have a disaster in the making, because when you have people starved of assets, when government have not moved drastically to implement the Freedom Charter's call that says the assets should be distributed, the land must be distributed, then you're sitting on a time bomb, because a combination of frustration and anger across the society, in particular the former exploit, is going to at some point blow that lid way above.
When you touch on the issue of mining, you raise this question of beneficiation, which Cosatu has been behind for quite some time. The new mining bill should be actually in force as we speak this year. Where do you want to see changes going forward? Practical, tangible changes?
From the workers' point of view, we want the patterns of ownership in this economy changed fundamentally. We want a nationalization of strategic minerals, strategic sectors of the economy, those sectors that if government was to intervene, and we're not talking about intervene by deploying the most inefficient cadres to run them, but intervene to ensure that they run efficiently in the manner that is going to generate resources to address the two other challenges this society is facing. The first biggest challenge, which is also linked to the structural nature of our problems, is that our education, notwithstanding the strides that we have registered over the past 20 years, remains an education in crisis, in that it is still leaking far too many of our children who don't reach matric, who never reach any technicals and universities, who end up in the streets without any skills, and so that they can climb that ladder. That's our structural problem. Secondly, our health system have not functioned anywhere close to ideal, outside the fact that we have a two-tier health system, a two-tier education system, a system that operates absolutely in well standards, but for the small minority, but a other layer which operates in crisis, with overstaffed, with understaffing, with crisis of infrastructure, with overburdens on the few shoulders of the doctors and nurses being the order of the day. We've got to address that. We've long spoken way back in 1999 about the need for the introduction of the national health insurance. That has not happened, and we are suffering.
It's 20 years down the line. The issue of nationalization is quite a very scary word. Which areas do you think in mining should be targeted in this particular area, and how?
All those that are efficient, and all of the future growth in the mining industry should be done in such a manner that reinforce the fact that government, on behalf of the people, should own these sectors of the economy with the sole aim of generating sufficient resources to ensure that it encourages development of the society as a whole. So I'm not going to prescribe whether it's gold but I will say that anything that is viable, anything that is profitable, anything that have a future potential of growth, and in a manner that is going to impact positively on the developmental agenda, must be areas that government must look. So when the president in the January 8 statement promises that there will be a revisiting of the mining bill, we're hoping that there will be this decisive action to ensure that we address that anomaly that so After 21 years, we have the mining industry completely outside the few sprinkles of chocolate here and there, but overwhelmingly, the mining industry, the land question remains as they were during the apartheid system.
We have run out of time. Mr. Vavi, thank you very much for the informative debate.